last time we were talking about depression. Is it in every circumstance where a person is, quote, depressed, do they have an evil spirit or a spirit of depression? And the answer to that is no. We're going to look at the different kinds of depression here. First of all, we've given you the definition of it. It means to lessen in strength or activity or discouraged, and this is one of Satan's greatest weapons against the Church of Jesus Christ, is to get the saints discouraged. And if he has you discouraged, he's got it made. I don't want to do anything more. I sure don't like what's going on in the church. And the minute he can get you discouraged, there is nothing else that you want to do for God, so why bother with anything else? And this is one of his easiest and most formidable weapons. Now, there are different types of depression. The first one we call endogenous. That's a big word maybe for some of us. And it means disposition or inheritance. Some people are born with a depressive nature. They are. They're not bubbly or bouncy. They really are sort of depressive. So let's try to take that into consideration. Then there is what we call a reactive type of depression. Reactive. What do we mean by this? Well, it's the kind that results from stress in a person's life. For an example, I believe that most people have suffered depression at one time or another, usually in the wake of some traumatic experience or some terrible loss. Some of the factors that may throw an individual headlong into depression are familiar with us. One, the death of someone that we love. A loss of some type in our life. Maybe rejection, separation from a loved one. Failure in marriage or work or school or financial setbacks, maybe even old age can bring depression. This is what we call reactive, or that which results from stress in a person's life. And we must remember that each of us have no doubt come into a situation of this in our lifetime. So let us not assume then that because we feel depressed that this is necessarily a spirit. Let's analyze and go through the understanding of depression before we start assuming this. Then there is the kind that we call is organically based, and of course this one results from illness. Many people go into the hospital and have an operation, and of course what happens is they feel ill. They feel not well at all, and they get depressed. This is something that I think when people go into the hospital to visit, they need to go in with a cheerful heart and a cheerful attitude to lift them and to build them and encourage them. The last thing they need is to have, continual somebody telling them that, that their faith is no good, or they're a sinner, or that they're, it's because they've sinned that they're there. They don't need all of that sort of stuff at that point. They need to be encouraged and to be loved, and then go into the other aspects later on when they're feeling much better. But there is this kind that's organically based, and that is a result of sickness or something like this that's happened in a person's life. Then there is the kind which we call is drug-induced. A lot of people can become very depressed when they've been taking certain kinds of drugs. Then let's look at the one that we call, which is organically based. This is what we call spirit. This is the one that we say is a spirit of depression. How do we recognize this then from all of the others? Because depression is depression then, according to what we would think. Let me say that on a number of occasions, depression, which is occultly caused or is a spirit of depression, some of the symptoms that result from it almost make a person believe that you are sick. And oftentimes people with a spirit of depression literally go to the doctors and say, look, hey man, I'm not well, and can you give me a pill to straighten me up? And this, of course, is when the doctor about this time says, look, it's all in your mind, because I can't find anything wrong with you specifically. And they go through one test after another. Now please, I'm not saying that every statement I make is a blanket statement regarding every case. I'm saying that these are many possibilities. And although the symptoms of depression are many and varied, the most prominent symptom is passivity, where absolutely nothing really matters. And of course, passivity breeds other negative responses, such as loss of interest, a decrease in energy and inability to accomplish tasks, difficulty in concentration, and an erosion of motivation and ambition. Now, during this time, strange things begin to happen. An individual may experience feelings of unworthiness, sinfulness, guilt, utter hopelessness, a lack of appetite, and listen to the things that take place in the body. There can be also constipation, digestive problems, sleeplessness, and various other bodily ailments, including nausea and headaches. And when a spirit of depression gets to a person to such a degree, many of these things then begin to take place in a person's life. Now, on a temporary basis, certain depressions, such as illness and so on, may give it on a lower level. But a spirit of depression can carry on, and if a spirit of depression carries on to such an extent that a person feels that it's utterly hopeless, that is generally when they commit suicide. And that is when old Slewfoot, his henchman, who is a suicidal spirit at that point, says, God made me do it. When literally it's been a spirit of depression who got the person to that point, and then another kindred spirit, a suicidal spirit, took over and made the person commit suicide. Now again, I'm not saying that everybody who commits suicide has been driven by a spirit, but some people have been. I had one young man ring my doorbell, and he wanted to come in, and he said, Mary, I don't know what's the matter with me. He says, I need ministry. He says, do you mind if I come in? Now this was along about Sunday evening around 6 o'clock. And I was standing at my kitchen sink, and I was washing my dishes. And I had my hands in the soapy water, and he didn't even phone to announce his coming. He was just in a desperate need, he said, and he looked really down in the mouth. So I said, well, all right, come on in, and just sit over here in my chair for a while. And says, do you mind if I just finish my dishes first, and then I'll be right there. Now, before this young man came to my door, I was standing at the kitchen sink singing and praising the Lord, and I was thinking, oh man, isn't life wonderful? Oh, it's so good to be alive. Oh, God, thank you for everything. I just really thank you right now that I've even got a sink to do my dishes in. I thank you for my dirty dishes. I thank you for my health. And I was just feeling like $1,000,000. And I wasn't even green and wrinkled at that point. Well, when this young man came to the door, and he came in and sat down, and I turned to go back to the sink again, all of a sudden, I am feeling this way. Oh, life is miserable. Who wants to live anyway? Everything has gone wrong. I just feel so terrible. And I thought, now hold it. Just a couple of minutes ago, I wasn't feeling this way. I was feeling good. Why now am I all of a sudden feeling depressed? A cursed spirit of depression came in that door with that boy. I will not have one of those cursed things in my house. Now, I dropped the dish in the sink. I did not even bother to wipe my hands off. They still had soapy water on them. I walked up behind the young man and plunked my hand on the back of his head, and I said, you cursed spirit of depression, come out of him in the name of Jesus. And that young man went, I just feel like something has left up like out of my head. I said, you're feeling much better now, aren't you, hey? He says, oh, man, he said, I feel great. He said, I feel so free and so light. He looked at me and he said, I don't even know why I came over here. You see, what I want you to try to grasp as we go through some of this teaching, some spirits actually give you their names, but we don't twig to them. You know, we say, oh, I'm so depressed, I'm so depressed, I'm so depressed. Well, that spirit tries to convince you that you are depressed when it's not you that's depressed, it's a spirit of depression that's depressed. I'm really not me today. Well, if you're not you, who are you? Following me? I was in Barbados, and we were ministering there in the conference. Babsy Bleasdale, the woman that I have spoken much about, was also with me there, and I was traveling with her. And we had been put up in the maternity hospital ward to stay there during our time. They figured this would be the best place to put us so that we wouldn't be bombarded by a lot of people, and we'd be quiet and so on. And I don't know whether they thought we were Elizabeth and Mary in our later years or what, but anyway. Sarah or whatever. But anyway, we did enjoy our stay there. And the only problem is that the nurses, realizing that we were there, thought that maybe they had a good thing going. So while we're eating our porridge, you know, for breakfast in the morning, they would come in and get ministry. We were there for a rest, you see. However, we didn't mind this. I know that when you're out on the road, you minister to everybody at any given time of the day or night. And so this young nurse came in, and she just came in and sort of flopped in the chair. She says, oh, I just feel terrible today, Mary. She says, would you minister to me? Well, you know, I'm just shoveling a piece of porridge in my, you know, a spoonful of porridge in my mouth, and I just, let me say, wasn't just right in the feeling in the mood to getting up and pushing the tray away right then and there and going over to minister to her, you know. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just ask her a few questions first and see if we can kind of get to the bottom of it, and I'll sit here and she can still sit there. So I said, well, look, just how do you feel? She said, well, I feel terribly depressed. Now, the first time I hear that word depressed, I start to twig, all right? Now, I'm not going to figure immediately that she's got a spirit of depression, so I'll just leave it at this point, and I will ask, I'll go through the whole gauntlet first. Are you naturally this way? You know, are you the type of a person that is generally depressed? Well, no. She says, generally, I feel really good, and I feel happy, and so, all right, that crossed that one out. Then I said to her, well, now listen, have you had some problem in your life? I said, do you have a boyfriend? Well, yes, I do. Well, have you had a problem with the boyfriend? No. Have you had a loss of a death in the family? Well, no. Well, is it, you know, what other problems? Well, I haven't had anything. She says, I just can't account for it. I said, well, all right. Then I said, have you been sick, or are you sick? Are you feeling okay? I went through all of the things that I could possibly think that, well, no, nothing wrong. I said, well, are you on some kind of drugs of any kind? Well, no. Well, only one other solution then, right? And she kept insisting how depressed she was. Well, I pushed my porridge back. Well, let's get rid of this thing then. Not much point in her going around feeling miserable anymore. So I walked over, put my hand on her head, and cursed that spirit of depression and said, in the name of Jesus, come out. And again, she did the same thing. She just sort of, oh, and her eyes began to sparkle. She says, man, I feel good. I said, sure, I'm sure you do. I said, you don't even feel the same way as when you came in the door, do you? No. She got up, walked out the door. You know, she didn't even say thank you. Oh, bless God. I sometimes think doctors should have people in the gift ministry in another office next to them. And when they can't quite get to the bottom of their aches and their pains and they're all depressed, say, look, go into that other office in there. They'll fix you up in there. Now, let's look at a spirit of oppression. There's depression and oppression, and there's types of kindred spirits in a way. But oppression is more emphasized by the weight that is pressing down that may or may not be successfully borne or withstood. A lot of Christians seem to think that people are oppressed by the enemy, that is, from without. True, oftentimes this is the case. Or, let me put it this way, they are bombarded or tyrannized or vexed by evil spirits. They're not possessed or controlled by them, but they're vexed by them, oppressed by them. And true, many times this is the case. But they may need special prayer or they may need special ministry, not to cast out, but take dominion and authority over and just get rid of them so they're no longer oppressed. I've gone through times in my own life when I felt that I have been vexed or tyrannized. And generally, in the wake of some great victory ahead, this often happens, where you really feel like the old slewfoot is right after you, you know, dust and everything flying. And you become aware that this is the spirit of oppression, and at that point, when you recognize it, you say, forget it, boy, gone. No way you're going to get me down. When we look at spirits of oppression, let's, for an example, maybe show you this way. There are some people who have been in concentration camps. And they were not willingly put there by their own design or their own desire. And they were believers. And because of the fact that they could not control the situation, they were put under great emotional and mental strain. And what happened is that the spirits of oppression literally oppressed them to the point that some of them would go out of their mind. Some of them made them want to even commit suicide. And at times like that, I can never, you know, say, well, they should have withstood even in the face of it, because many people's emotional problems and stamina are not able to cope with such powers of darkness that's literally pushed on them. They cannot control it, and if they could control it, they wouldn't ask for it. So it's not a case of them willfully giving over to it, but they just can't stand under that power any longer. And I believe that there are also people who are living in homes where these things are so. And they feel that life is so terrible and life is so oppressive that they literally want to commit suicide, and it's something that they're driven to because they can no longer tolerate those particular circumstances. So I'm just wanting to give you this to let us understand then that there are different types of spirits, and some we willingly give into and some we don't want, and I think as we begin to understand them, we will more have dominion and power and authority over it, so that we can get victory in our lives and also see to it that other people have victory. Now I'm going to turn to Romans chapter 8 and verse 15, because we're going to see here some different types of spirits. And in this case, it is talking about a spirit of bondage. A spirit of bondage. What do we mean when we talk about a spirit of bondage? Well, what does bondage mean? I believe that bondage is anything that brings us into a place of servitude. Servitude. Anything that brings a person into a place of servitude. God has not given us this bondage. I'm going to say something that maybe will raise a few eyebrows, but I'd like to kind of think about it a moment, okay? I often wonder if at the back of the credit cards or behind the credit cards there may not be a spirit of bondage. It's okay if you have credit cards and you know how to handle them, and you know that they're there for a good service and a good purpose. But I know many people who have gotten so bound up using credit cards that they're in debt up to here, up to the end of their lifetime and beyond. And they are so caught up in it that they don't even have enough money to go and buy a hamburger at the Golden Arch. And they become in such a state that the husbands and wives are constantly fighting at each other, and no sooner do they get out of one credit card when they're back into using another one and get right back into the same thing again. And the greatest portion of their money and their funds is going into paying interest. I'm saying there's nothing wrong specifically. There's nothing unclean of itself. And it may be a good thing for many people to have a credit card. But I'm talking about the misuse of it, where it's now become controlled. They don't control the credit card controls them. And I am sure that there is a spirit of bondage behind that. Now I'm going to throw something else in for free, and I'll get a few more other raised eyebrows on this one. I do really hope that you are watching this television program. Believe me, I do. But I also know this, that there are some people who have a spirit of bondage in connection with watching television. And you cannot unglue some people from the television set. You try to get them to go on a picnic. You try to get them to go for a bike ride. You try to get them to go anywhere, and they are glued to that thing, and they're never going to leave it. Now, don't stay there for the next whole day until you see the program again. Come back next time, and we'll show you some more on the discerning of spirits.